with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. Hey, Rich, man, we got an incredible show today. In just a moment, we're going to have on David Marcus from the Federalist. And this week, the New York Post, the front page, just this big sort of screaming headline, one man's plea, it needs to end now. And he's talking about, we got to open up New York City. You got to open up New York City. And it's a really great piece, the way that he goes through this and, what we were supposed to happen. And a lot of it's happened. And the city is really struggling. I mean, so many entrepreneurs, out of business and in small businesses. And, when can they open? Well, how many of them will even survive? But then you have other states around the country who are opening. I mean, you'll take a look at what's happened with Governor Kemp in Georgia, right? They opened, and actually the numbers went down. You got DeSantis. I mean, the liberal media beat this guy up, and yet Florida now is opening. South Florida has just opened, and seems like everything's going well there. But still, the Northeast, Illinois, they're doubling down, it seems, on what it's going to take to get those states open. And then you see this week the unemployment numbers, another 2.4 million Americans filing for unemployment. All the pain and the misery and the suffering. And how about all the deaths in addictions and everything else that's going to occur because of people staying at home and not being able to feed their families? I mean, it's just, how about all those folks? Who's talking about them? Who's on their side?
We are. And that's the whole point, in that people are losing their sweat equity from, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, family companies, family stores. I mean, basically, that's the American dream. That's the backbone of this country. It's the small business that actually it creates the most jobs in this country and gives everybody a chance to have a piece of the American pie and have something for themselves and their family and the future children and all that other stuff. And when you don't allow these people to do their job, to have their livelihood, and I don't care how much money you give people, you just can't fix it. Money, listen, if money fixed it, then the war on poverty up to $22.3 trillion would have done a great job. It hasn't. Be perfectly honest, it hasn't. We know that. We've been discussing
the poverty
that,
rate has not changed at all.
14 years, and so money's not necessarily the answer, but in terms of dignity and believing in yourself. So when people don't have everything they worked for their whole life, and they're sitting in their home, and in some states, good Lord, if you mowed your grass in Michigan, you could get in trouble. I think the Scott people would come who would, give you your fertilizer, and they arrest you, give you a Scott ticket. I have no idea. It's totally insane. But it's very, very important that we believe in small business. We have to do something to help them.
Well, that's a great lead-in to our first guest today. We're very pleased to have with us Sally Greenberg, who's the executive director at the National Consumers League. And in Real Clear Markets, she's got a piece, with growth in mind, Congress must be more small business inclusive. And on that, we can all agree. Sally, welcome to Made in America.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Nice to be with you this afternoon.
Well, very good. And, you publish a piece, and you're saying that Congress needs to be more engaged in helping small businesses. And that I can agree wholeheartedly. I'm an American manufacturer. We have close to 400 people working in our company. I started the company. I own the company. It's very near and dear to me. And I got to tell you, coronavirus, we just hit a wall. I mean, it's like a brick wall. And the PPP money really, really helped. It really, really helped. But it's gonna run out in June. And then what happens? We're still waiting to figure out. I guess there's no talk about extending that. So I guess once it's gone, it's gone. But in your piece, you're talking about, we have to expand the guardrails. We got to expand the parameters of the PPP program. And Congress should do more to help small businesses. So how should they do that exactly?
Well, yeah, that's right. And, we know that small businesses are really the backbone of America, and we don't want to do anything crazy like, you guys were talking about opening up various places. I mean, we're in the camp that says we got to do so carefully, we got to do so step by step and see where it goes. And if there are outbreaks, then we're going to have to slow things down. But I think what we have to be aware of is that small businesses are getting hit probably harder than any other businesses in the United States, and they are, 13% of small business owners are saying they can survive less than a month. Most Americans don't have some big number, like 75% of Americans don't have $400 to spare in the case of an emergency. And I think many of these small businesses are very much on the margins. And yet, what would life be like in America if we didn't have these wonderful small businesses? You go to any city, any travel destination in the United States, and you've got the beach shop, and you've got the surf shop, and you've got the taffy place, and all of those places are small businesses, and we absolutely need them to survive. So the point of our piece was, we need to ensure that the rules for who applies for this money, and it is, it's a federal bailout. Let's face it. There are times when the federal government really does need to step up and help those most in need. And in this case, I would say, it's people, it's individuals, it's the 30-some million people who've lost their jobs, it's people who need health care, but it's also small businesses. And we need to not make it so difficult for them to get access to this PPP and other money that's bailout money that other Americans are enjoying. Now, the House of Representatives passed the HEROES Act. They passed it last Friday, and they're waiting for the Senate to act on it. It has money for local governments. It has money for small business. It has not enough for small business, and perhaps not enough for some of the local and state government health workers. But there's a lot in there to like. And now what we're doing is waiting for the Senate to act. We've got to get Mitch McConnell at the same place as the House is, and to move forward on the HEROES Act, because that will have some bailout opportunities for small business. And again, the point of our piece was there's some very restrictive language in there that says if you're affiliated with another company and the other company or a few other companies and they have more than 500 people, that you can't get access to this money. And we think there are many cases where you do have small businesses that are part of a larger company. They're not necessarily getting a big infusion of cash from those larger companies, and they may be making critical products that we need to help us fight this pandemic, like masks, like respirator equipment, like hand sanitizer. And we shouldn't be so restrictive. And unfortunately, Secretary Mnuchin did a lot of shaming and blaming of companies that accepted money when, they're trying to keep their workers going. They're trying to ensure that they can make payroll, that they can pay some of the just infrastructure costs that are enormous when you run a small business. So we were raising the red flags and saying small businesses are the backbone of America. We all depend on them. We need them. Many of us have family members who run them, and we need these very tight restrictions on small businesses without letting in fraud, waste, and abuse. And there will always be those who will try to take advantage. We know that. But we need to ensure that they have a wide berth, and that if they're using the money to make payroll or to pay their utility bills and to keep the lights on and to keep their staff employed, we should be cognizant of that, even if there's these strict rules that have cut out a lot of important businesses. And then we had situations where businesses were shamed into giving money back, and I'm not sure that was that was fair. and that was right. And if they're keeping people employed, if they're operating for the benefit of consumers, as long as they're doing so safely, I think they should have access to the bailout money, just like other individuals or state governments should.
I think you're very correct in saying that the primary focus, the focus, not just primary, the focus should be on small business. Money that could have gone to the small business did not go to the small business, went to larger businesses, companies that really didn't need the money as much as the smaller guys did, or for venues that really didn't fall under the concept of those being hurt by the COVID in terms of employment, such as the Center for Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Foundation for Humanities and things like that. So I think a lot of people had concerns with that. I think other areas that I agree with you on, and this is up, by the way, this is being debated right now, that the 8-week period, that the day that you're funded, you have 8 weeks to spend that on payroll. Primarily payroll, a little bit of benefits and some rent prior to February 15th, all that stuff. Well, a lot of small businesses cannot do that in 8 weeks. And so what are they going to do? You know what I mean?
Well, they got to pay it back. But
yeah.
But Rich and Sally, we got to take a quick break.
Let's take a break
because this is going to get into a real discussion here that we need to have. We're together with Sally Greenberg. She's the executive director of the National Consumers League. We're talking about small businesses and what we need to do to make sure that they stay part of the American dream. This is very important to your jobs. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. And we are with Sally Greenberg, who's the executive director of the National Consumers League. We're talking about her piece, published in Real Clear Markets, with growth in mind, Congress must be more small business inclusive. So just before we broke, we were talking about, did some organizations and some businesses get this PPP money that should not have got it? They've already started putting cases against people who got this money fraudulently.
Fraud, yeah.
To be fair,
guys, so here's what I would say. There's outright fraud. So there's a guy who took the money and he spent it on cars and vacations and Cadillacs and houses. Okay, that's fraud. But then you've got a bunch of businesses, including that are associated with much bigger companies like Shake Shack.
Well, you're talking companies that are like that hedge funds or private equity firms are invested in, and the private equity firms, are invested in like 20 different companies, and you have to, should they put all those employees together under one umbrella, or should they look at this investment individually and hit that 500 or less employees?
We want to be clear what we're talking about, because we all know that there are folks who own franchises of some of these big companies, like a Shake Shack, like a Potbelly, like a Ruth Chris, and they're franchised, so that
who are individually owned, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and they have a tough time. They have to go by the bigger company rules, but they may be 40, 50 person operation, and they're going to need some support. They're going to need to make payroll. The franchisees, we've gone to bat for them over the years as a consumer organizations on many occasions, because they're under very tight and not very kind agreements with the larger company. Oftentimes, it's hard for them sometimes to make ends meet. If they're super popular, maybe like a Potbelly or Shake Shack, whatever, and they have a big customer base. Great. That isn't always the case with these franchises, and they have a tough time staying alive too. So we're saying we have to bear that in mind. Let's take a closer look. Let's not make assumptions. Yeah, sure. Hedge funds, if they're billionaire hedge funds, I'm with you on that. They don't need taxpayer help. But some of these
Sally,
other operations.
I'd like to get Rich and you in on this, because you just brought it up, and. But you brought it up about the House bill and the $3 trillion, and that we got to help small businesses. But that House bill of $3 trillion, there was a lot of stuff in there that had nothing to do with coronavirus, had nothing to do with this. It was a lot of the sort of wish lists from the left. And I know that the conservatives would do the same thing. But the fact is that this was not to help small businesses. Only a very small part of that money would go to small businesses. Let's help small businesses. I agree. But let's get rid of all that other garbage. Rich, what do you say?
Well, I mean, I don't call it garbage when we're going to help state and local governments who need to keep people on. Let's say, right around where I live, there's lots of testing going on in Maryland, Virginia, and D.C.
Okay, so let's help. Okay, I got it. Let's help the healthcare workers.
Right.
Let's help. Okay, well, that could be agreed upon.
Here's a concern, and this is what you're hearing across the board, and that is. And they're saying, why should people live in a state that's been well run, i.e., let's go to Florida. Florida maintains a balanced budget. New York has a horrible budget. They're imbalanced. They have horrible leadership as it relates to, the economics of it. Why should we take the money for this and give it to a states who have had imbalanced budgets for many, many years that the COVID scenario did not necessarily throw them in that direction so badly? I don't mind helping states, and I agree you're right. If something related to COVID and we can help in terms of the viral negativity, then I think that's fine. But if that money can be conflated with other funding or budgets that have been running at a super negative environment, then that's a bit onerous. And that's, I think, when you get into the argument with some folks. What do you think?
Right. Here's my opinion on states and whether they're well run or not. New York returns hundreds of billions of dollars to the federal government. Kentucky is in the red with monies to the federal government. New York has consistently. I'm not going to argue with you about how it's run because I really don't know, and I couldn't say. And they've had many, many governors, some of whom are probably better than others. But the truth is, there's many, many states that are always in the red in terms of what they deliver to the federal government in tax monies, and they tend to be states like Kentucky, states like Mississippi, states like Louisiana. So I don't really think we want to get into this argument because New York State, Massachusetts, all the states that you guys might regard as not being well run are so much more lucrative and deliver so much more tax money to our federal coffers than a lot of the states you guys are talking about. So I don't think this is a winning argument for you. What I would say is this is a country that's hurting across the board. We need to reach out to look at the state of Michigan. Sometimes there's a Republican governor, sometimes there's a Democratic governor, but they've just been hit with horrible flooding. So I think we as a country need to come together and say we need to be there for Michigan, or we need to be there for Florida. And Florida's had terrible hurricanes. Louisiana, terrible Katrina. That's when we come together as a country and as a people and say, when people are in need, we need our federal dollars to go help them and not judge one way or the other, because I don't think this is a winning argument really for anyone.
Well, Sally, we're going to leave you with the last word. We really appreciate that.
Okay, guys.
You get the last word. Sally Greenberg, the Executive Director of the National Consumers League. We really appreciate the things that you do.
Okay, we're there for the small businesses, too. I appreciate your having us on.
Thank you. Coming up, we have David Marcus from the Federalist, who has a front page on the New York Post. It needs to end now. That's what we're going to talk about.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Roffman. And Rich, as promised, we're very pleased to introduce our next guest. David Marcus is a writer for the Federalists. We love the Federalists. Great organization. We've had a number of their people on our show. He also writes a couple of times every month for the New York Post. And in fact, his latest piece is the front page of the New York Post. The headline here is, "It needs to end now." And he's talking about New York City and getting New York City open. And to kind of paraphrase, he says, look, our hospitals were going to get overrun. well, they didn't get overrun. In fact, I read earlier today that the actual hospital admissions are lower than it was when they started to keep these records. In other words, they made an incredible amount of progress. Hey, we need to turn the Javits Center into a hospital. No, we didn't need to do that. It was barely used. We needed to bring in this big, beautiful Navy ship. Well, that wasn't used either. Oh, we need all these ventilators. Now we're like sending them to wherever because we got so many of these things. But meanwhile, David says that the Big Apple is dying. The streets are empty. The bars, the jazz clubs, the restaurants, the coffee houses, Broadway. My goodness, I was thinking about going to Broadway this summer. You can't go there because there's not going to be any Broadway shows. But David is with us right now, and we're very pleased to have him on the show. David, welcome to Made in America.
Thank you for having me. So,
David, is there any sort of movement in the direction that you say that we need to open and we need to open now, or are you just a crying voice in the woods?
I think there is. There's been a very interesting reaction to the piece from a lot of people who do feel like it absolutely is time for New York to get back to business. And so much of the economy in New York is, restaurants and bars and clubs and tourist destination stuff. And they've just been destroyed. Not to mention hotels, just go right down the line. And unfortunately, a lot of these places are not going to come back. And we are really at a crunch time right now because there were a lot of small businesses that maybe had enough resources in the bank to survive a month, 2 months. We're at 2 months right now. So we really need to move now, or this can move from something that thus far has been economically painful to something that's going to be absolutely economically catastrophic.
Well, I agree with you, and I was so delighted to not just read your piece, but listen to you. You're all over the networks this morning. It's very important. It's sort of like, David, I don't know, anyone telling you that you're Thomas Paine? I mean, anyone say that? It's like, wait a minute, this is some common sense. This is what it's all about. You kind of encapsulated what everyone's thinking right now, and I think it has to be said, and it has to be adamant that we're saying it. Because this has to stop. It's sort of like a compact was broken. You gave us our word, your word, that if we close down for 2 weeks, if we flatten that curve, if we stay home, if we don't do everything that we normally do, if we give up basically what you're saying, our rights as an American citizen, we'll go for that. We'll help you. We'll be part of that. Because that's what America does. We're an amazing country. But then, all of a sudden, as you're pointing out, it's not really going to be that anymore. It's going to be another 2 weeks after that, another 3 weeks after that. So it seems like this compact, this agreement, this word that we gave, that across the board by many politicians, really meant nothing. It's either they were beyond their ability to think straight, which, by the way, I got to tell you, de Blasio, one would have to do copious amounts of drugs to understand where he's at right now, and those days are over years ago. But the point of the matter is, either they didn't know what they were saying or they just outright lied because they knew they weren't going to open up in 2 weeks. So I guess the word I would use is betrayed. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there is some feeling of betrayal, although I do think a lot of it just sort of is incompetence, but also certainly a fear on the part of Governor Cuomo, who we now know committed a whole lot of missteps, especially involving nursing homes that sadly cost a lot of lives. And I understand why he's reticent to make any more mistakes. But this is a desperate situation. And the fact of the matter is, keeping the lockdown up not only has those devastating economic implications, there's also health implications. People aren't getting cancer screenings. People aren't getting all kinds of non-COVID related medical care. And people are going to wind up dying as a result of that. So there are a ton of legitimate competing interests at work here. And sadly, what's happened is many on the left have said, no, there are no competing interests here. Either you're in favor of the lockdown or, you want to kill grandma. And that's not a serious way to look at this problem, and it's not the way that we can afford to look at it anymore.
But you see what's happening in New York isn't just only happening in New York. I mean, look what's happening in Chicago, the other great American city. And Governor Pritzker this week saying that, if you break the stay-at-home rules, you could get jail time. We're going to lock you up. You're going to jail for that. And as far as, conventions and things returning to Chicago, and it's an incredible convention city, we have to have a vaccine before that can happen. I mean, if you're going to run a trade show in Chicago right now and you're going to have thousands of people coming there, how can you even plan for that?
You can't, and we don't know that we're going to get a vaccine. I mean, let alone like how long it will take. We don't even know for sure that we'll get one. So, yeah, I mean, listen, the other thing that I think is going on here as we reach this 2-month point is we need to seriously start thinking about whether the government even actually has the authority to do this. And I have colleagues who are constitutional attorneys and people that I know, and it's one thing to say, okay, there's a medical emergency, so we have to do something crazy, and for a couple weeks you can't go to church, even though the First Amendment guarantees you your right to go to church. We're at 2 months. How long?
So, David, hold that thought for a second. We got to take a quick break because you really hit on something very, very, very important: the constitutionality of this whole thing. And we got to dive into that. We're talking to David Marcus from the Federalist, and a great piece in the New York Post that it needs to end now, and it needs to end now. He's talking about New York City. A lot more to talk about. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman, and we're going to get right back with David Marcus from the Federalist, and he was on the front page, his piece, front page of the New York Post this week. It needs to end now, and he's talking about New York City and getting people back to work, and it just doesn't seem to be happening. And if it does, it certainly isn't happening fast enough. And then you get to the whole constitutionality of these stay-at-home orders, these lockdowns, and everything you can't do. I mean, it's getting crazy to the point of some governors, like Governor Pritzker of Illinois, saying, if you violate this stay-at-home order, we're going to take you to jail and we're going to fine you. And, I mean, my goodness, on civil liberties. And by the way, where are all those folks who are supposed to stand up for civil liberties? They're quiet. I mean, they're just like totally, they ran for the hills, I don't know why, because this is a huge affront to just sensible behavior of what our government should be doing to protect us, and to protect our freedoms, which are so essential to America and what we mean as a country. So, David, you're starting to see courts right now step in and saying, no more. You've gone way too far. I mean, look what happened up in Wisconsin, an amazing thing. And now you see this now happening around the country. You can't do this. Governors, you way overstepped your authority. So what do you think about that?
Well, I was pleased to see the president, when he made his remarks at the White House prior to heading out from Michigan today, hint at some action that the White House may be taking with regard to church attendance. And that's one that I really like to focus on because it is so plainly guaranteed in the Constitution and, frankly, so central to the very founding of the entire country. So, yeah, you have to say, what constitutional authority does the government have to say you can't go to church or to contact trace you if you don't want to be contact traced? I mean, there's surveillance issues. There's all of these civil liberties issues, and they're not getting dealt with prior to these governors trying to, do what they're doing now. Attorney General Barr has also sort of intimated that she thinks maybe some of this has gone too far. So I'm hopeful that you'll see some action out of the White House and out of the Department of Justice to try to explain to these governors that, you're not a dictator. You don't just get to do whatever you want to do because the coronavirus is here.
Well, also, I think you're right, and a lot of people are taking action to their own hands, including legal action. Shelley Luther wound up in court, and she became the cause celeb in Dallas with her beauty salon. Tillis Gym across from you in New York, I mean in New Jersey right now in Belmar, New Jersey. You've got Ian Smith and Frank Trombetti have been fighting Governor Murphy now for 3 days. They actually arrested the owners of Tillis Gym the same time they're letting 7 rapists out of the same jail. And there's no protection for them in the COVID, from the COVID virus, or the Wuhan virus, as one would like to call it, in the jail. I mean, it's sort of like, by the way, have you seen Rod Serling up there lately? Because it seems like he should be in a corner somewhere smoking a cigarette, wearing a Cooperman suit, and talking about what's going to come for the next hour.
That sounds about right. Absolutely. And that's why, I have to be honest with you, I was a little surprised that the New York Post ran this piece pretty much the way that I wrote it, because I do just flat out call for business owners to open. Just open. You own a nail salon, you own a barber shop, you own a sporting goods store. Open it up and force de Blasio or Cuomo to shut you down. And I think what we've seen from some police departments, interestingly, across the country, including that I believe it was a sheriff in Belmar at that gym, is cops don't want to do this. This is not what they signed up to do. I think this is probably a time when making your voice heard, certainly, but also maybe a little bit of civil disobedience in terms of telling the government, you don't completely get to decide how I live my life and how I run my business and all of those things. So
can you tell us in the very short time that's left? I mean, you are, the front page of the New York Post. I mean, that's a one heck of an honor. I mean, did you know they're going to run it this way? And and like you said, I mean, you're saying, folks, open up, do it safely, do it with also social distancing, do it responsibly, but open it up, get back to work. And this is the New York Post. I mean, an incredible institution who's supporting that. And you're on the front page. I mean, this is like a huge statement. Did you know it was going to go this way? I mean, how did you know this?
I didn't know until last night. I wrote the piece on Wednesday originally, or over the weekend, originally intending it to be at the Federalist, which is where I'm on staff. And it was after I saw these lines of people early in the morning waiting for food to feed their kids. And they say, you're really not supposed to write angry except on those occasions when you are. And when I got to the end of the piece, I thought, why don't I show this to my editor at the Post, because it's very New York-centric and stuff. So she said I'll run it, at some point early next week. And I think really what happened is that there's so much energy building behind the desire of New Yorkers now to reopen our city and get back to our lives, that my editor, Sohrab Amari at the Post, just really pulled the trigger at the perfect time. So he gave me a call last night and told me this is going to be the cover. And I thought he meant, it would be like a little banner or something. And he was like, no, this is the whole cover. And I was like, all right.
Yay for you.
Here we go.
Congratulations on that.
David, I mean, a wonderful story. We got to get you back on, but unfortunately we're out of time. David Marcus from the Federalist, and we're talking about his piece on the New York Post. You got to go see this. You got to read it. It's a beautiful cover. It's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful piece.
It's an important story.
And it's got so much wisdom behind it. We got to do it, folks. We just got to do it. David, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you guys for having me.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, I'm very happy we were able to ask David, how this got to be the cover, because I think that's a whole story in by itself, right? I mean, to put this piece on the cover, I mean, the whole cover, the entire cover, knowing that this thing was going to go viral, and it did go viral. You see it all over the media right now. This cover. That it needs to end, and it needs to end now, and New York's got to go back to work. And he's advocating, the New York Post is advocating, that people just start opening up their businesses, do it responsibly, but it's now time to open. And if your governor and if your mayor is standing in the way, it's just going to have to be a sort of a class action thing, because if we're going to wait on them, It's going to be too late. The time is over. And even if you did it now, Rich, how many people are going to be able to come back? I was driving through the Florida Keys last weekend, all over the Keys, for sale, for sale, for sale, for sale, for rent, for rent, for rent, meaning businesses, right down overseas highways. So many of them, for sale, for rent.
Really? You're seeing that now in storefronts is what you're saying.
You're seeing it in storefronts. I mean, it's already happening. And Florida's opening now. New York, they don't even know when it's going to open.
Yeah, that's a scary part. In media, sometimes it doesn't have to take a Charlie Krauthammer, whom we all miss,
yes.
Dramatically.
I love that guy.
Yeah, just a brilliant writer.
I wish he was here now. I mean,
yeah, would
he be a voice of clarity?
Oh, my God. And then you have somebody like David who, and it's not even a very long story. It's basically, I don't know. I don't even think it's 1,500, 2,000 words.
Yeah,
it's really quick.
It's right to the point.
Yeah, and he very succinctly encapsulated everything that people are thinking, not just in New York, because the concept is exportable to all the major cities that are being locked down right now. They're saying, well, you're right across the way, New Jersey, the whole state, we're not opening up. You go to Michigan, we're not opening up. You go to Illinois, not only not opening up, but we've got lots of jails for you, and we have a lot of extra room because let the criminals out.
All the criminals out.
Yeah, let the criminals out. It's all right.
Yeah, because you wanted to walk your dog, you're going to jail.
Right,
now.
You're going to go to jail. And a lot of people rethink Pritzker owned properties, by the way, for that. But I have to tell you, he really well
by the way,
encapsulated that.
Did you read the story? I got to bring this up. Pritzker's wife, where she was during coronavirus?
Where was she?
Florida.
Bless her heart.
He sent her to Florida. Can you imagine? The governor says, we're not going to live under our rules.
Well, of course not.
Of course not.
I mean,
we're just going to send her to Florida.
Of course they're going to do that.
Where they're going to treat her humanely, and she's going to be she's going to actually have a governor who's going to be for the people and rooting for the people, not in our state.
Here's the thing that drives me crazy.
Now that is the ultimate wokeness.
Yeah. Here's the craziness that's out there. Cuomo, the governor of New York, makes an inordinately lethal, stupid. I mean, David Marcus calls them stupid, along with de Blasio, decision to take older people who have had COVID or test positive and take them and put them back in the home. Oh, they have to go back into the home. What happens in New York State? Thousands of older senior citizens died as a result of that. DeSantis controls the whole state of Florida with 22 million people here versus 11. 22 million people here, right? We do great. We have a low death rate. We've controlled it. We respected the senior citizens. We protected them from this. DeSantis gets attacked by the media, the mainstream media, when Cuomo is raved. They just eulogize. Oh, my God, what a brilliant. He looks presidential. But not DeSantis, who actually saved the lives. I just find that to be astoundingly stupid.
Well,
how to say that?
It's
been bothering me.
Well, that is.
It's bothering everyone out there right now.
And then you got, oh my goodness, Governor Kemp of Georgia.
Oh my God, they called him a murderer. He has blood on his hands. He's killing people. In the meantime, the first week it went, they had 14% reduction in deaths, 14%. The next week, 12% reduction. He's going in the right direction. DeSantis did the same thing. The media attacked him the other day at a presser, and he said, "Are you people nuts? 8 weeks ago, you said we were going to have death here. It hasn't happened 8 weeks later." It's just insane. It's just absolutely insane, Neil.
But unfortunately, I think that this is just the world we live in, and, it's not going to get better. Unfortunately, I wish it were to be not the case, but you take a look at what's going on in Michigan and the governor there.
You know what these guys are doing and these governors are doing in these other states? They're killing the American dream. They're killing the small business owner, the mid-sized business owner. They're wiping out decades of equity, sweat equity. That's awful. They don't have the right to do that.
And for what? For their hatred of Trump. Because
that's right.
If the economy is tanking, if it's cratering, he won't get reelected.
That's right.
But we are out of time. But we're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America. Will we never stop fighting for your jobs?